Hi, I'm Max Rodriguez, publisher of QBR, the Black Book Review, and founder of the Harlem Book Fair. Today, we're speaking with award-winning blogger and author, Mark Polite. He has written a book, The Binge Watcher's Guide to the Black Mirror, a British science fiction anthology, The Black Mirror, that was written by Charlie Brooker 50 years ago. Welcome, Mark. Welcome to the Harlem Book Fair.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this welcome. Good to be part of it.
Okay, great. So we're going to get to the book, but first, let's talk about your career as a blogger, as an award-winning blogger.
When I started becoming a writer, I decided to start with politesociety.com. And it's a site that that's been up and running for the past 12 years. I started it back in 2009, and it was a platform for me to really play with some of the ideas that I had in my mind about society and what we have to face as, people of color and African Americans. So it grew from being social commentary to talking about video games and hip hop, and it grew from that to deal into literature reviews, poetry, covering what's going on in the Harlem community. And it just manifested into me deciding to become an author, because after years of blogging, I feel as though I got under my belt the experience that I needed to become a writer and become start to publish my own books. So I can credit my blog career with me launching into the foray of being an author.
So is this something that you recommend? Is this a pathway that you recommend for other authors, or is writing as a blogger so very specific that you would not necessarily recommend it as a pathway to writing?
Well, that's a good question, Max. I would say if you're into covering the most up-to-date and most current issues, I'd recommend blogging, right? And it really preps you to deal with things on the fly. For example, you can talk about, say what happened today, the space race with Jeff Bezos going, doing a space run and being in space for 11 minutes. And what does that mean? And is it wasteful, or is it really something that needs to be done? So you can cover these kind of issues if you have a blog, right? But the thing about it is blogging doesn't necessarily limit you. You can use it as a springboard to build an audience as a writer. Because when I first started as a blogger, I used that audience to say, okay, I'm going to be here for this book fair. I'm going to come to this book fair, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to be here. And some of the same people who were reading my blog started to get into my poetry. So it was definitely a good springboard. So if you're passionate about writing in general, I definitely would recommend blogging. And contrary to popular belief, it's not really dead. There's always the question of every year, is blogging dead? Is video blogging a new thing to do? But no, blogging is still very much alive. So I'd still recommend this as a viable path for people who want to become writers.
But I'm also hearing that you have to have a passion for the subject matter, whatever it is.
Yes.
So I'm going to need to frame that question again, because what I'm hearing here is that, again, you need the passion for the subject, for whatever it is you're writing. And just because you have a book idea doesn't mean you can be a successful blogger.
So that is true. I will say that with my blog, I mostly talk about social issues, and I talk about the things that go on in the Black community and everything. But these things I have a passion for. Some of the issues might not necessarily translate well into a book format, but what you can do with a blog, right, is blogging is really short form writing. And if you want to, some of the ideas that you that you can save to decide and develop for a book that you can give like a longer treatment. Like for example, like you can easily do like a show recap or something like that, right? You can recap a series or recap an episode, but to give it something a longer treatment and to get into deep analysis, that would be more appropriate for a book per se. But I would say blogging is a good training ground, but you still have to have the passion for it in order for it to really translate. So I'd say that as a bit of caution for anybody who wants to jump into it. You have to have the passion and the know-how as well.
So what do you mean by the know-how?
What I mean by the know-how, it in terms of just knowing what the nuts and bolts of writing a book involves, meaning where you're going to publish it, whether it's going to be self-published or more traditional. Like for example, if you're going to self-publish, the nuts and bolts of it would mean knowing about the ISBN numbers and knowing about margins for printer and having someone look over your manuscript to kind of look and see for editing, issues and anything. The nuts and bolts of, proofreading and prepping and just kind of figuring out whether things flow or not. Like for example, like one of my other books is called it's an essay collection called Everything to Learn, Nothing to Teach. And it's my second book. It's a collection of essays where I talk about different issues. And one of the things that I was doing in the book was looking for sequencing, meaning I would collect all of the material that is more socially based, right? And I would collect it and put it in one area of the book, and I would have another area that is more anecdotal based, meaning my upbringing, like how I grew up in Harlem and what that was like in the late 80s, early 90s. And that's more anecdotal. So I had to figure out, okay, this is global and it relates to everybody, but this is more personal. So this should be in this chapter and this should be in that chapter where I'm talking about my personal upbringing. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to divide these things and make it make sense of it. Because for a book, you have to kind of have a certain flow, and it can go from the general to specific or the specific to the general. And you have to make sense of that and make, little editing decisions here and there and make sure it makes sense and it's palatable to your audience. So that's what I mean about nuts and bolts of putting together a book.
Did your work as a blogger help you in developing your book structures?
It did. It did, but I still had a lot to learn because, most blog posts are anywhere from 500 to 700 words. And, you have like a general intro, like, body conclusion, just like that. And the point of a blog post is to kind of get to the point and just really just hit the points and just make them all make sense and kind of wrap it up in a bow. But with a book, it prepared me, but writing a book is more challenging. Like I'll give, for example, this book that I most recently released, the Binge Watchers Guys, The Black Mirror, it was a lot more involved. The book itself is actually 50,000 words, and that's the first time I've ever did anything like that. Because how do you have the National Novel Writers Month contest where you have to produce a body of work that comes up to at least 50,000 words of novel length. Right. And being a blogger, it took a lot for me to stretch and to make bigger points and to not just truncate my points and to really go long and expand on what I was talking about. So while blogging was a good training ground, I had to expand and learn, as I became like, a more known writer.
So So how did you learn that process of continuity, of, as you say, extending the idea?
Would say I learned that the process by like really going over my topics and material. I would really go in deep and analyze things, and I would, you know, with the creation of this book, and in collaboration with the publisher Riverdale Avenue Books, it was a chance for me to really do some film analysis. And I'm not one who I didn't come from film school. You know, I studied political science and history, so it was a different experience for me. But with this book, I really had to analyze a lot of things about, character development, so what someone's motivations are, what someone wants, and to kind of make it make sense for that whole storyline, all the different various storylines in the series. So I would learn about, you know, the dialogue and who says what to who, and who's in certain instances who's the voice of reason in the episode, and who's the Captain Ahab kind of person who is just going for what they want and doesn't care how it ends. And to understand what that means for character development and understanding, plot lines and things like that. So that's things that I haven't really previously delved into in my writing, but this book definitely stretched the horizons of what I've been able to write about.
So are you pleased with your work?
Yes, I am. I've, I'm pleased with it. I've been kind of doing like a little virtual tour here. I've done a few things. I've been kind of virtually touring with the book. I did something at the Schomburg last month. I read like an episode from there from the intro of the book, and considering the things that we're going through with COVID, it's getting a decent response, because the thing is, a lot of people are still, even though a lot of us are transitioning back to work and everything, but a lot of us are watching television. And Black Mirror is a really popular television show on Netflix, and some of the things that happen in the show, kind of mirror the things that we have to deal with now, like how a lot of things are still virtual and everything. So, like, I'm proud that it came out at this moment, and that I had this moment in time to really address this issue, because like I'm a science fiction head regardless. So it gave me the opportunity to really delve into my love for science fiction. So I'm very proud of this book.
That's very that's very good. So tell us all a little bit more about the Black Mirror, because truth be told, I'm not familiar with a 50-year-old science fiction anthology, British science fiction anthology, that has found its way to American audiences. So tell me about the Black Mirror.
Okay, so all right. So the thing is, I just wanted to say that the the director, his name is Charlie Brooker. He turned 50 this year.
Ah,
Black Mirror itself came out in 2011, meaning the show itself is 10 years old. So that's the difference there. But to give a basic bottom line, Black Mirror is essentially the 21st century, the Twilight Zone.
I see.
It's kind of like in that vein, where it has like a twist at the end, and there's a plot that you don't see coming. But the difference is that Black Mirror is more of has a technological side to it, whereas the Twilight Zone had kind of a fantasy and aliens and in Cold War, a lot of allegories base it. But Black Mirror, the show, deals with the conundrums that technology puts us in. Like, for example, like, how much information is too much information? Talking about cancel culture, is it possible to know too much about one another? To know that, like, things that we made mistakes on years ago, and then things get dredged up years later. About the culture of social media, about how easily people could turn on you off of one post that they don't necessarily like. So Black Mirror deals with all these technological issues that we have to face in the modern times, but it puts it in the framework of entertainment. But at the end of the episode, when you look at it, you'll be left thinking once the credits roll, like, is that where we really are in society? Is that where we're headed? Is that what our society looks like? So it's basically food for thought presented in a science fiction format, and there's like a cautionary tale behind it. So that's what Black Mirror is.
You know what I'm enjoying these days, Mark, is that more and more Black writers are leaning into future thinking, future thought. That includes science fiction, speculative fiction, what's being called Afrofuturism. And so there's a real energy that Black folks are insisting to be heard within. And I love that idea. I love that idea. So tell me, how did you come to know speculative fiction, science fiction? What are the roots of your love of science fiction?
Oh, okay. All right. So pretty much my love of science fiction comes from, a more the old school science fiction. Like I grew up watching Star Wars, Star Trek, the original Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, that kind of stuff. And these things always fascinated me because it was really about understanding where our society is going and what our future society might look like 20, 30, 40 years from now. And it really captured my mind. Like I've been into all that stuff like War of the Worlds, Alien Nation, things that I grew up with. And it always captured my imagination because some science fiction is about presenting a better version of the future, whereas other science fiction, which in some cases is called dystopian fiction, presents the possibility of a way worse world. And that's a cautionary tale to not let certain things happen, to not let society just go to pieces. And I just was always interested in science fiction because it just showed the possibility of a better world, or at the same time it showed if people don't do what they can to pull things back from the brink, that humanity could slide into complete catastrophe. So those elements like really stuck with me, when I saw these things as a child.
What about today? The Black Mirror, yes, and others, representative imagery. How well are people of color represented in today's science fiction?
I would say that there's a long way to go, but it's getting better. I would say,
sorry,
that's a loaded question because, that's the thing. Science fiction, one of the bad things about science fiction, especially from, earlier eras, is that unfortunately it's kind of been associated as a white thing, and it's become like, oh, well, that's for white people, and that's, white people don't get involved in that. But as more science fiction writers are making themselves, known and making their voices heard and everything, and the alerts is getting out, more platforms emerge for science fiction writers, and Black people will be seen in the future. So I would say, in terms of science fiction, I would say, even though unfortunately it's gotten canceled after one season, Lovecraft Country was a really good inkling of where things could have gone. I also have been watching The Expanse, and that's on that's more of like a space, science fiction, and it kind of dovetails with kind of what's going on with the whole billionaire space race of how, rich people are trying to get to different planets and colonize and everything. So, but in terms of, the depictions of Black people, in science fiction, we've come a long way from Uhura and Star Trek, the original series,
right.
in, coming from, the original Colonel Ty in Battlestar Galactica, all the way down to Geordi LaForge in Star Trek Next Generation, down to Captain Benjamin Sisko and Deep Space Nine. And, you know, where it's like a constant progression of seeing ourselves in the future that is kind of like you know, an ongoing struggle, you know, that to be seen and to let, you know, your average 8-year-old see a reflection of themselves in the movie and said, you know, I want to be the one that's saving the universe. You know, I want to be the one that's holding the laser gun and fighting off the mean aliens and saving humanity from complete disaster. So yeah, we have a long way to go.
Hmm. Okay. So and the other part of that representative imagery is a piece of it, but also what you said, the idea that science fiction had been thought of as sort of the realm of white writers, you know, of white people, as if to say Black people don't have the right or the idea or the vision to future project, or even worse than that, that in this future projected world, there is a absence of Black people, or certainly an absence of Black people who contribute to that world. So, so there is the Black Mirror and your work, your contribution, the Binge Watcher's Guide to the Black Mirror. You've also written you self-published a couple of essay books. Just tell us briefly about those so we know the range of your work.
Okay, so I have 4 books. The first one is Poetic Ruminations Volume 1. That's a collection of that's a collection of poems that I've written. In addition to writing essays, I'm also kind of dabble in poetry. So that book is, you know, about building your self-esteem up and recovering from setbacks and everything like that. So, you know, I talk about like healing and just dealing with the outside world and how we have to contest with things. My second book is a collection of essays. It's called Everything to Learn, Nothing to Teach. And I talk about everything from gentrification to how colorism affected me growing up in Harlem, how, you know, what it was like, dealing with my early years of college and, and dealing with a lot of, ill treatment and everything. And I deal with, some issues like police brutality, the economy, and I kind of sum it up by talking about the experiences of people who graduated post 2008 economy and how a lot of us are still struggling to find our way in the world, after that economic collapse, and how we just were never on track to where we should be, in our careers or whatever. So that's the second book. The third book is Poetic Ruminations Volume 2, which is a follow-up to my first book of poetry. And in that, I'm talking about my views in terms of the world and how I see, the rest of the world. And I'm talking about what it means to be aware in a society. And, a lot of different things about how do Black people navigate, the society, knowing that we have so many different arrays of forces against us. So that book is more of a social political poetry commentary. So that's the kind of bend of it, So yeah, and then my most recent book is of course the Binge Watcher's Guide to Black Mirror, where I do a recap and analysis of all 5 seasons of Black Mirror, including the interactive movie Bandersnatch, which is all available on Netflix for anybody to see.
That's very impressive. That's very impressive. So I am new to Mark Polite. Which book should I pick up first?
Okay, so if you are new to me, I would go with the Binge Watcher's Guide to Black Mirror. And I'm saying that because
that's what your publisher would want you to say.
Yeah.
That too.
Oh yeah, I mean that too. But like, you know, I would say I go with this book because, you know, I put a lot into it. I spent the majority of quarantine, right, writing this book, and I put a lot into it. And I've studied, I researched, and in my recap and analysis, right, like I had to go back and look at things like, so, and understand, like, you know, the origins of internet technology and all these kind of things, and the origin of a lot of the military technology that was kind of talked about in the in the series. And, you know, I would say that, you know, as an introduction to me, this is the most lighthearted, you know, book that I have, because the other ones, you know, they're a little bit more pointed, you know, politically and socially. And, you know, I'm in those past, I'm more explicitly talking about African American issues explicitly with No Chaser. But this book, I'm more so talking about everything. So this is a good introduction to me. And if you're like this, you know, 9 times out of 10, you go back and you look at what I've done before, you'll be like, okay, all right, I've seen the growth, I see where he's come from, and then okay, this is what he is now. This is where he is now. So
very nice, very nice. Thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the viewers about you or your work before we close our conversation?
well, I would like to say that, you know, in terms of my work, despite the consequences, I always aspire to tell the truth, and I always aspire to really, you know, lay a claim to what's really going on out here. I don't like to sugarcoat things, and that's my bent. That's how I look at things. So, you know, when I explore these weighty issues, whether it be in fiction or whether it be in real life, the intention of it is never to denigrate anybody or never to downgrade anybody, but it's always to get at the truth. And sometimes getting at the truth means means bringing uncomfortable conversations into the mix, but it's done for a bigger purpose, to get at the truth of the living in this time, and to get at, you know, how things need to change for the better. So that's really my MO for why I write and what I talk about.
It's very good. Thank you so much, Mark. I know that people will want to read the book, certainly pick up The Black Mirror. I'm going to jump on Netflix and take a look myself. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your support of the Harlem Book Fair. I'm Max Rodriguez. We were speaking today with Mark Polite, author of the Binge Watcher's Guide to The Black Mirror. Stay tuned for more great programming. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks again, Max. Appreciate it.